They're still here. The shadows know the truth.
All right, think about the places where you feel the absolute most secure. You know, your living room couch, a quiet high school hallway, or even just your own bed at 2 in the morning. We totally take the safety of these everyday spaces for granted, don't we? But what happens when that illusion of security just shatters? In today's Explainer, we're diving into the source material to break down 6 documented, entirely true accounts that prove exactly how mundane, everyday spaces can literally transform into absolute nightmares in a split second. We are looking at the architecture of fear.
Welcome home. Now, that chilling little whisper, that is not some line pulled from a cheesy Hollywood horror script. No way. That was a documented real-life encounter experienced by an urban explorer inside an abandoned building, and it's a story we are going to fully unpack in just a few minutes. Honestly, it sets the stage perfectly for exactly what we're looking at today.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, Anatomy of Everyday Terror, Hiding in Plain Sight. Moving right along to Section 2, Cornered in Safe Spaces, Nowhere to Run. So imagine being trapped in an environment that was explicitly designed, heavily structured, and locked down for the sole purpose of keeping you safe. Like a school, right? Well, take this absolutely harrowing account from the source of a high school sophomore. They finish up gym class late, so they're totally isolated in this old cardio room. As they walk out into the quiet hallway, they suddenly spot a grown man, a total stranger, aggressively yanking on the locked gym doors. Instinct immediately kicks in. The student just bolts down these dead silent corridors, desperately trying to find an open door, an exit, literally anything. But every single door is locked from the inside. And then the intercom crackles. A garbled voice announces a school-wide lockdown. That's when the student realizes they are trapped out in the open with the intruder. It turned into this terrifying cat and mouse game. The source details the sheer auditory dread of this student hiding, just listening to the echoing footsteps of the man bouncing off the metal lockers. They were constantly staying just one step ahead until the police finally breached the building. The wild thing here? The lockdown protocol, which was meant to protect, inadvertently turned those hallways into a literal trap. Which brings us to Section 3, Tracked to Your Door, The Illusion of Distance. What if you aren't trapped in a public building, though? What if the danger actually follows you home to the one place you should be absolutely secure? Picture this. It's the innocent nostalgia of a family trip to an early 2000s blockbuster video. A kid is just wandering the aisles, picking out movies for the weekend, and notices this unkempt man with stringy hair acting kinda weird. But, they brush it off. Fast forward just a few hours. The family is home, safely miles away in a nice, quiet neighborhood. The narrator goes to close the living room window shades for movie night, looks out into the dark, and spots a strange car. The driver gets out, and guess what? It's the exact same man from the video store. A few minutes later, the narrator hears rustling out in the front bushes. They peek out the window, and there he is, standing just feet away in their yard, just watching them, before suddenly sprinting off into the night the second he's spotted. All that distance they traveled provided zero safety, none at all. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that this wasn't just some creepy one-off encounter. This was a relentless 7-year escalation documented in the source material, taking place in a tiny Midwestern town of literally just 400 people. I mean, look at how this builds. At age 13, it starts off with this mysterious metal jingling and a cellar lock getting cut with bolt cutters. Creepy, sure, but by age 16, the narrator starts hearing tapping and actual physical slaps on their bedroom window while they're trying to sleep. At 17, it turns into aggressive police-style pounding on the front door at 2 a.m. And in the present day of the account, it escalated to the family's protective guard dog being drugged with tainted food and the home's front and back doors being found blown completely wide open in the morning. And you want to know the most disturbing part? The source notes that when they finally started asking around, multiple women in this tiny 400-person town realized they were all experiencing the exact same terrifying things whenever they were home alone. All right, Section 4, The Faceless Unknown, The Terror You Can't See. We often fear what we don't understand, but the source material really highlights how some threats are profoundly terrifying simply because you never actually get to see the face of the person tormenting you. Consider this crazy incident from the late 90s. A police officer is parked in his cruiser late at night in a rural gravel spot right next to some thick woods. Out of nowhere, this massive rock smashes right into his rear window. When he jumps out to pursue, the attacker has already vanished rapidly into the dark brush, navigating these pitch-black woods with impossible speed. The officer never even saw a face, and despite calling for backup and doing a full search, the guy was never found. To brazenly attack a police car and just melt into the shadows like that, that's chilling. But now, compare that physical assault to a completely different, purely psychological attack from the source. A secure, fifth-floor apartment, late at night, where relentless calls are coming from an unknown number, hiding cowardly behind a disconnected line. The compounding dread in this apartment story is just palpable. So call 1 comes in late. A man's voice simply says, "Guess I have the wrong number," and hangs up. Honestly, you'd probably just brush that off, right? But then comes call 2, the very next night, at the exact same time. This time, the voice doesn't apologize. He just asks, "What is your name?" The narrator hangs up immediately. Well, the next morning, the narrator wakes up to 10 missed calls from that same number, and 1 voicemail. The source describes the sheer auditory terror of this recording. The narrator listens to 15 seconds of heavy, moving breathing on the tape. And then, the sudden, deafening sound of a large glass window shattering, right before the line abruptly cuts dead. Now remember, the narrator lived on the 5th floor, and all their windows were completely intact. So, whose window did he break? Your mind just races with the implications of that unseen violence. Let's move to Section 5, Secrets of the Abandoned, Left Behind. If well-lit apartments and schools can harbor this much fear, I mean, just imagine what happens in places society has deliberately forgotten about. Isolated, abandoned places act like absolute magnets for deeply disturbed realities. Now, to understand this final narrative, we need to define a specific term: haikyo. This is the Japanese practice of exploring abandoned ruins. It's often driven by the thrill of searching for the supernatural or maybe uncovering some hidden history. In our source material, 2 skeptical explorers decided to practice haikyo by trekking out to a forgotten, abandoned mental hospital deep in Japan. They went in looking for ghosts, maybe a lingering spirit from a tragic past. But what they actually found in the dark was something infinitely worse and grounded strictly in the world of the living. While they're digging through old files in this dusty upper office, one of the explorers hears that faint, seemingly impossible whisper right behind his ear. "Welcome home." He spins around, but nobody's there. Thinking it's just his nerves playing tricks on him, he ventures down into the underground basement level. He walks into these rooms that are still equipped with heavy wall and floor restraints. In one empty room, the walls are entirely covered in deeply disturbing, highly graphic crayon drawings depicting horrific, violent nightmares. But it wasn't the drawings that made his blood run cold. It was the dates written right next to them. They were dated from within the last month. And this brilliantly illustrates the horrifying twist here. They hadn't found a ghost at all. They had just stumbled into the active, underground lair of an incredibly disturbed, violent individual who was currently living in the basement of that abandoned hospital. They were literally standing in someone else's horrifying home. And finally, Section 6, What Lurks in the Shadows, the final takeaway. When we look across all these accounts we've explored today, a very, very clear pattern emerges. The architecture of fear really isn't about the supernatural. From a high school lockdown protocol tragically failing a student, to a stalker bridging the gap between a brightly lit video store and a suburban front yard, to voicemails in a locked apartment and a squatter in a forgotten hospital basement, the core lesson here is that terror relies entirely on subverting our expectations. It literally takes the environments we rely on for protection and it turns them right against us. So, if true, visceral terror can hide in a quiet Midwestern town, in a mundane video rental aisle, or just behind a simple wrong number on your phone, how well do you truly know who is watching you right now?